Hey everyone, it's Camber here with YoPro in the Know. I'm sitting here with Braxton DeCamp, 26-year-old senior FP&A analyst for Hydrant up in New York City. Braxton and I have actually met before. He has been dating one of my best friends from high school for several years, and although we've only met once, we were talking just now about how I feel like I might as well know him really well anyways. So happy to have him on the podcast today. Braxton, why don't we get started with just a brief overview, background, who you are, where you're from, and then we'll dive into the details.
Of course. Thank you so much for the intro. As you said, my name is Braxton DeCamp. I currently work at Hydrant, but my background, I'm from Lexington, Kentucky, where I grew up and had a great time with a couple other YoProers. And from there, I went to Wake Forest University, where I studied finance with the goal to kind of work in the commercial banking and investment banking world. I quickly, about a year after college, while working in banking, realized that my interests lie a little bit more into the startup and building a business realm. And so about a year out of college, I moved from Cincinnati, Ohio, where I was working at Fifth Third Bank, to New York City to work at Genius Media Group, which is a music startup that focuses on lyrics and kind of the interpretation of lyrics from different artists. I spent about a year and a half there, where I kind of got my teeth cut in the startup finance realm and moved over to Hydrant, which is an electrolyte beverage company, also based out of New York City, where I currently work, and I'm having a fantastic time.
Awesome. Thank you for that overview. Tell us a little bit more about Hydrant, so what the company is like and what your day-to-day looks like there.
Of course. So Hydrant, like I said, is an electrolyte beverage company. So we're a CPG product, which is consumer processed goods. And we really focus in on the hydration aspect of your everyday life. Our big focus is to build a routine in our customers' lifestyle, where you are, instead of waking up in the morning and having a coffee or immediately grabbing like a bagel, have a hydrant and hydrate yourself so that you're more properly prepared for the day, instead of kind of jumping to caffeine or other stimulants.
Mm-hmm.
And we're a very small company. We started in 2017 with our founder, John Sherwin, who about in midway into 2018 met his co-founder, Jay Kim, and they had built up the company through 2018 and 2019, where I actually joined as our fifth employee back in July of 2019. And
okay.
Just as the company was really starting to see some exponential growth on the online sector. So we're primarily focused with selling direct consumer, which is either via the Shopify, really popular company that's doing really well, and on Amazon. However, with 2020, we're looking to kind of expand our business and move into the real brick and mortar retail space by moving into some of the big name retailers, so that we can see our products and really get it to nationwide in the US, rather than just focusing in on the direct consumer experience.
Mm-hmm.
And what that means for me as a senior FP&A analyst is a lot of things. I learned very quickly in startups that your role might mean that you're focused on a very specific thing, but once you get into a startup, it's really like, this is your core four things that you work on, and then everything else is just, hey, who has the time, who has the skills to be successful. And you really have to kind of adapt and learn every single day so that the company continues moving forward, because you can't hire a new person for every little activity. And so my day-to-day is a lot of fire drills, and it's kind of sprinkled in with a lot of financial analysis, projections, and then also kind of making sure that everything is actualizing on the accounting side very cleanly.
Great. Yeah, I can imagine that in a finance startup world, you definitely play a lot of roles and probably wear a lot of hats. And especially as the fifth employee, I would imagine you've seen a lot of change. So remind us how many employees there are now.
So I think we've just hired now our 13th employee. We grew a lot in 2020. I think we ended 2019 with 7 employees full time.
Mm-hmm.
And now we've continued the growth through kind of coronavirus, which has been extremely interesting to not only continue growing the company on the revenue side, but also grow the team during a period of time where most people are saying, or most companies and most people are really not hiring and not looking to grow their team. So we've had an interesting time, not only going through the interview process, but onboarding new employees that haven't actually met any of their coworkers and most likely won't
Right.
until potentially September or October of this year.
Hmm. Which is crazy. And that really segues into my next question, which is, how have you been impacted by COVID-19? I know just because of what Francis has told me, his girlfriend, for those of you who don't know who Francis is, she said that you guys have been quarantining with family in a different state. So are you back in New York? What has COVID done to your day to day?
On a day-to-day basis, everything has been working remotely since kind of the beginning of March. I've been in Florida and still currently am in Florida, escaping coronavirus,
Hmm.
but will be shortly returning to New York City
Hmm.
and kind of continuing the remote lifestyle,
Hmm.
which when we're looking at it at a real, like, how does it impact the day-to-day work, it just means that the team has to connect more on
Hmm.
phone calls, Slack, and on video calls to make sure that everyone's on the same page. But when it comes down to it, especially in how fast Hydrant wants to move on a day-to-day basis, it
Hmm.
hasn't truly impacted much of our business.
Hmm.
Since we are primarily focused on our direct consumer, we have had the ability to kind of still target our consumers, still fulfill to them, and still keep growing the business as a whole. Where we have seen an impact is we were really excited to start opening up retailers in kind of early to mid 2020. And
Hmm.
because of coronavirus, you're seeing many of these retailers are either furloughing some of their staff that aren't essential workers in store, or they are really kind of calling a pause to any new products because they are not sure that they're really ready to bring in new products and set up new merchandising. So
Hmm.
we have seen a slight impact where we're having extended life cycles, but nothing that has impacted the business extremely negatively. And so
Hmm.
we've been very fortunate that our business has continued to grow and that we've been able to grow the team with that during this time.
Hmm.
And we hope that once we kind of get on the other side of coronavirus, we're going to be able to be fully prepared to kind of take the next step.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. It sounds like, although, of course, you've had some obstacles, it seems like you've been able to kind of wade through those, which is really great because a lot of companies, particularly in New York, are struggling. So I would imagine that your size probably helps in some ways of your company. And clearly the vision of your founders, it seems like, has helped y'all in a lot of ways. So
Absolutely.
one question that I know I didn't prep you with, so I'm going to throw you a little bit of a curveball here. Um, I want to know, we have a little bit of extra time, that's why I'm going to throw it out there. But what in your 3 years out of school has been the biggest challenge for you? Like, this doesn't have to be just in your current job, but what has been a challenge for you, and what have you learned from that?
I think this is a great question. Two of the biggest challenges I've seen, and it's really been focused on the past about year and a half, is the focusing on communication and effective kind of like self-reflection on a day-to-day basis. It's something that everyone believes that they're very good at and they're very self-reflective. But when it comes down to it, you never want to hear from your boss or from a coworker that you didn't do something well. And oftentimes that's something that you need to hear so that you improve. And I think it's very much a lost art with some companies. A lot of companies will just kind of let it slide. They'll kind of just like kick the can down the road and let people continue making mistakes. And I think one thing that Hydrant does, and one thing I will always give props to both of our co-founders and kind of the entire culture as a whole, is is held very accountable in a way that is not detrimental to your growth. It is saying, hey, if you did something that is maybe incorrect or wrong, it's pointing it out, understanding what mistake you made, and then improving on it for the future. And the understanding that, hey, there's no hard feelings here. You shouldn't feel bad if you make a mistake. It's part of the growth. It's kind of part of the startup culture that I enjoy so much.
Mm-hmm. I think that's great. And I would imagine that a lot of people listening to this or watching this would find that really interesting and might want to, pursue something in this field. So I think there's a lot that you just mentioned there, but the key thing to me is self-reflection. I think that's something that we're always working on. And, you said that everyone likes to think that you're self-aware and, that you're really self-reflective. But at the end of the day, no one wants to hear when they do something wrong, but it takes a really special leader, I think, to make you feel good. Good is maybe not the right word, but make you feel like you can move forward beyond the mistake or beyond the error. So I think that's a great way to end the interview. A few things before we wrap things up officially. I know you had mentioned earlier that there might be something for the audience, discount code, right, for Hydrant?
Yeah. So the discount code is YOPRO, YOPRO, on drinkhydrant.com. It is 25% off. So I'd love for everyone to try it out. And if you don't like it, you can email me directly, Braxton@drinkhydrant, and you can yell at me for spending your money.
Well, thank you, Braxton. We really appreciate that. My other comment that I want to make, and one thing I failed to mention at the beginning that you did mention was, you knew two people that we've already interviewed on the Yo Pro No before in the past. And I want to point that out now because it just shows that everyone is truly interconnected. Those two ladies did not even connect us. It was just, something completely two different completely connections. And it's one thing that I think brings, that's something that, the Yo Pro No does well, I think, is bring people together. And I think that's really cool to just see that web. Because at the end of the day, we are all interconnected. So Braxton, thank you so much for being on Yo Pro in the Know today. We're happy to have you.
Thank you so much for having me.